Attention passengers. Today on Strangers on a Podcast, we have a 1951 classic from Alfred Hitchcock. It contains thrills, chills, handsome men, beautiful women, a trigger-happy cop, and just a dash of murder thrown in for good measure. Join us, won't you?
Hello, and welcome to the Movie Car here at Strangers on a Podcast. We're the Strangers. I'm the Conductor.
I'm Grimweed.
We are the only podcast hosted by two men in different parts of the country who do not know each other. We met through a mutual friend online and have never met in person. I'm in the Midwest, and
I'm on the left coast.
yet through the magic of telecommunications technology, here we are, coming to you, the listener, relaxing, we hope, somewhere comfortable, somewhere that the temperature and humidity are pleasant for you, somewhere you feel welcome and safe for a little while. Here on Strangers on a Podcast, we talk about movies.
And if you're not somewhere where you feel safe and comfortable, go somewhere you feel safe and comfortable. Get out of where you are.
Exactly. That's vital. I'm a lifelong movie nerd. For a long time, I've made it my mission in life to see the strangest, most obscure films ever made. And I've come across many a gem along the way, some dark, some bright. I cut my teeth watching Godzilla and King Kong as a little kid and moved up through animated movies in the 80s like Secret of Nim and The Last Unicorn. And that's right, I said the 80s. As in the 1980s, of which I am a child, and anyone who knows the 80s knows that what was gigantic then, it was well-developed character dramas, like The Big Chill and Working Girl, but also horror, and boy did I jump in the deep end of that as fast as I could. What about you?
Yeah, I pretty much the same. I grew up watching 80s movies, kind of fell into horror through a family member, and never wanted to really climb back out of that hole. I like a lot of the mainstream 80s horror as well as the weird what am I watching? I've watched movies like Quest for the Egg Salad, which if you haven't watched it, it makes Plan 9 from Outer Space look like Citizen Kane.
That is a new one to me. What is it called again?
Quest for the Egg Salad, I believe
Quest
it was.
For the Egg Salad.
It's one that was obviously filmed in some guy's basement or cellar, because many times when they're supposed to be in the throne room, it's the big cinder block walls, and you can tell what it is. And I believe there's times you can even see paint buckets sitting off to the side.
Well, even then, at least they had the heart to do it. At least they finished it and got it out there.
Yes.
I haven't seen that one yet. I'm going to have to try to find it on Tubi or something. But why would we do this, you ask?
That's what I'm asking.
Partially to see if it can indeed be done. You see, our doing a podcast together is both a social and technical experiment that, to our knowledge, has not been attempted before. Can two strangers talk over a pair of mics in two different parts of the country and just yak about movies without wanting to kill each other? What the hell do we even know about movies anyway? We have a layman's understandings of film and film theory, and we both specialize in different genres.
You sure about that?
Well,
it sounded like we both just said 80s horror.
Yes, but you're more of a sci-fi guy, and I'm a little more of a horror guy.
Well, we'll see about that.
We will have to see.
We'll see how this kind of unfolds. Who knows? It could be that we both really like chick flicks.
I don't think we're going to get to that
so
point.
Either.
No. Princess Bride, though. I love Princess Bride.
Yeah, there you go.
But does it count as a chick flick?
It depends on the chick.
True enough. What is great about movies? What's not so great about the movies? We're two film nerds talking our way through it. We humbly invite you to join us in the movie car of this train we call life and listen as we discuss the films that inspired the name of our little experiment. For our first episode, we have none other than, all the way from 1951, Strangers on a Train.
1951, wow.
Yes, that was a while back.
A little bit before my time.
A little bit before a lot of our times. It was a different time back then. It was an interesting story with a lot of twists and turns, one could say. It was produced and directed by world-famous Alfred Hitchcock from a screenplay by Raymond Chandler, but wait, no, not really. It was written by a woman named Shenzi Armand, based on a treatment by Whitfield Cook, and IMDb lists Ben Haight as doing uncredited work on the screenplay, but all I can find of Mr. Haight's. actual involvement in the writing is being unavailable and suggesting his assistant, the aforementioned Miss Ormond, as an alternative.
Adapted from a book.
It was adapted from a book by Patricia Highsmith. It was based eponymously and directly on the novel by Patricia Highsmith, her debut novel, actually, which caused some little bit of trouble for Hitchcock. The film differs from the novel in many respects, and Highsmith, who went on to write the Tom Ripley books, had something of a seesawing opinion about Hitchcock's adaptation of this, her first book.
From everything I've heard about her and been able to find out, Hitchcock is the master of suspense. She is the mistress of suspense. Her work is definitely something that I would want to look more into.
I have not seen the Ripley movies. They were recommended to me by a friend a long time ago, and I've just never been able to find the time to watch them. And I've never read the Ripley books either, of course.
And not Ellen Ripley. Completely different.
No, not Ripley. This is Tom Ripley. Tom Ripley, the serial killing socialite.
That would be a cool crossover.
Yes, Ripley's Game versus Aliens.
Strangers on Nostromo.
Well, if they can make Quest for Egg Salad, they can make that. Cinematography for Strangers on a Train was handled by Robert Burks, and wow, did he have his work cut out for him. Hitchcock had some crazy ideas for this one, and Burks pulled them all off and got an Oscar nomination.
If I remember right, he was the one that stuck with Hitchcock through pretty much all of his American classics.
He was indeed, and he was
one of the few.
He was a fine collaborator for the great director Hitchcock, and one could imagine that the end of their collaboration was the end of the golden age of Hitchcock's great thrillers. Now, according to screenwriter John Michael Hayes, Burks gave Hitchcock marvelous ideas and contributed greatly to every picture he shot during those years. Speaking of Oscar nominations, the only one Stranger on a Train got was for Burks' cinematography. Hitchcock got nominated by the Directors Guild for Outstanding Directing, and the National Board of Review nominated it for Best Film, but both Burks and Hitchcock lost all three awards. It received mixed reviews from critics and only made its budget back domestically.
A lot of people thought that, what was his name? I just completely blanked. Not
star?
Guy, the other one.
Bruno.
Yes, Bruno. A lot of people felt that he should have been nominated.
For Best Actor?
And that's where they thought it was interesting because the way the movie was, he could have either gone as Best Actor or Best Supporting. He could have double dipped. And to not get nominated for either one for that character, a lot of people thought was a slight on his ability. And then he died shortly after this.
He did die shortly after, sadly. The film stars Farley Granger as our harried protagonist Guy Haines, Ruth Roman as his love Ann Morton, and Robert Walker, Hitchcock's first and only choice, stealing every scene he's in as Bruno Antony, inventor of the crisscross double murder scenario, and yes, it's that movie. Leo G. Carroll had 4 years to go before a tarantula put him over a barrel in 1955, playing Ann's father, Senator Morton, in this. The director's daughter, Patricia Hitchcock, plays Barbara, or Babs, Ann's sister and the senator's other daughter. Casey Rogers, appearing as Laura Elliott here, plays Guy's philandering and soon-to-be-dead wife Miriam. Rounding out the cast are Marion Lord and Jonathan Hale as Bruno's doting but oblivious mother and his rich, disappointed father, respectively. Howard St. John as Police Captain Turley, John Brown as Professor Collins, Norma Varden as Washington Society woman Mrs. Cunningham, no relation to Happy Days, that was in Milwaukee, which, as Alice Cooper taught us all, is derived from an Algonquin word, milioque, meaning the good land. And Robert Gist as Detective Leslie Hennessy, Guy's shadow for the latter half of the film. There's lots of other people in the movie, but for the most part, they don't have named characters, only bit parts.
Basically nobody that matters.
Darville, though. Anyway, everyone does a great job providing the right atmosphere and background for Hitchcock's picture. It was a fly by the seat of your pants kind of number. They were just, we'll have the script for the next scene sometime tomorrow. We don't know exactly when, but Shenzi is working on it, and she's just marvelous. That's my Hitchcock impression right there. I don't know how good it is, but that was it.
I'm not even going to try.
You don't want to try your Hitchcock impression?
No, I'm good.
Fair enough. As far as casting, Hitchcock wanted William Holden as Guy Haines, but couldn't get him. William Holden, you may remember, I believe he was in Bridge on the River Kwai. Yes, that was him. He was also in The Omen 2 for genre fans out there. Hitchcock couldn't get William Holden. Farley Granger had worked with Hitchcock a few years prior on Rope from 1948. Genre fans out there might remember Granger best from the 1981 slasher The Prowler with makeup effects by Tom Savini. The studio head David Warner wanted only contract players where possible and insisted on Hitchcock casting Ruth Roman as Guy's love interest Anne Morton. Hitchcock had wanted a blonde and was pretty bitter that he couldn't get one. What is the movie about?
Well, basically, you have a tennis player and a rich psycho.
A rich psycho.
That
yes.
by chance happened to meet on a train.
Indeed. The movie has been parodied in sitcoms like The Simpsons and in films like Throw Mama from the Train. The story is pretty simple. Two guys meet on a train and one of them tells the other about his idea for a crisscross double murder plot where two people, each with someone they'd like to rub out, go ahead and kill the other person's would-be victim.
I'll take your murder, you take mine.
Exactly. This allows the one who wants that person dead to have a completely legitimate alibi, and it allows the actual murder to be in no way tied to the crime because they didn't even know the victim. I'm making it sound complicated. It's really not. A tennis player wants his current wife out of the picture and happens to meet a psychotic rich boy who wants his father dead. The rich guy, Bruno, mentions to the tennis player Guy that they should do the crisscross. Bruno kills Guy's wife with nothing to tie him to the murder, and Guy, in return, would kill Bruno's father. You see, Bruno leads a lavish lifestyle, doesn't want to be tied down to a job, you see, and just having his father's money would make it that a lot easier. Guy wants a divorce from his wife, but she's not going to give him one because she wants to milk him for all he's worth. Guy is in love with the senator's daughter and needs his divorce to marry her. Miriam is in love with partying on Guy's dime and getting double-teamed by a pair of studs at a local amusement park.
Watching that scene was a little weird.
It was.
It really comes off like she's out with two guys, and then when Bruno joins the scene and it's like, okay, you're with these two guys and you're just flirting with this random guy.
She was making eyes at him.
And yet she couldn't see what was going on, and the only reason they kept grabbing her hand was because she couldn't see.
She had some pretty thick glasses.
Yeah, those glasses, there was multiple pairs, and the glasses they had for those close-ups were pretty thick. And she's what she says is she couldn't even see, like when she put her hand in front of her, like move her hand in front of her face, she couldn't see the blur of her hand.
No, it was not the right prescription for the actress by any means,
no.
And she was basically blind while wearing them.
Yeah, so all the hand holding and everything else was just so she didn't trip. And when you watch her getting in and out of the bus or on the merry-go-round, it looks like it 100% looks like they're flirting. And they're just trying to make sure she doesn't get hurt.
If only all actors could be so gallant and film productions would be that focused on safety. Oh, wait, it wasn't focused on safety at all.
No.
In fact, the
merry-go-round.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
We will get to that. Now, the thing is, Guy happens to be sane. You see, there's Bruno, Guy. Bruno's insane. Guy is not insane.
And by insane, we're talking about, there was talks of blowing up the White House.
There were talks of blowing up the White House. Guy hates the woman he's married to, and at one point says he wishes he could strangle her, but really doesn't seem like the murdering type. After he finds out the divorce is a no-go, he heads back to Washington to come up with something else. Bruno finds Guy's wife. He follows her to an amusement park and kills her on a little island the park has set aside for people to ride little boats to and fuck in the grass. The two men who were going to fuck Miriam on the island find their body, and Bruno makes his getaway. At that point, Bruno finds Guy back in Washington and tells him, "I did my end, now you do yours." Guy, being the nice guy he is, does not want to kill Bruno's father. He didn't actually expect Bruno to kill Miriam. But now Bruno could go to the police if he wanted and tell the cops that Guy killed her.
Yeah, now let's talk about that for a second here. So Bruno shows up and says, "Hey, Guy, I just offed your wife. Here's her glasses for proof." Why are you carrying around evidence, man? It's you grab the glasses so you can prove to him, yeah, I killed her. But, if you get caught with them...
That's it.
Yeah.
Guy is stuck in a trap. You see, Guy had the motive and the cops already think he did it. Because Guy finds out from the cops that his wife is dead a few moments later. He goes into the townhouse where the senator and his daughters live, and they say, "Oh, Guy, we have bad news. Miriam's dead," and such.
But he already knew this. Remember, he already knew. He
already knew because Bruno had just told him outside. You see, all it would take is some falsified evidence given to the police from someone who was at the scene for the cops to send Guy to the electric chair. Guy can't just go to the cops and claim Bruno killed Miriam because he doesn't have any hard evidence, though this is kind of fridge logic. In reality, if someone was caught in this scheme and they knew who the real murderer was, they'd probably tell the cops as soon as possible.
You would think.
I would have to think so, yes.
You would hope.
Now, the rest of the movie is Bruno putting the screws into Guy and Guy trying to get out of the trap and clear his name. Bruno stalks Guy in the streets, and at his tennis matches, and even shows up at a party thrown by Senator Morton, the father of Guy's love interest, Ann Morton. Bruno gives Guy a key to his father's house and a map to his bedroom and a gun to shoot the old man, but Guy only uses these to try to enlist Bruno's father as a possible ally against his son. Bruno catches him in the act, though, and Guy flat out tells Bruno that he's definitely not going to murder Bruno's father. Bruno proceeds to plan his frame job on Guy out of revenge. Guy's only way out is to catch Bruno back at the scene where the murderer is going to try and plant evidence, back at the island of fuckery at the amusement park. So it becomes a race against time, with Guy having to win a tennis match and get to the amusement park in time to catch Bruno. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Then watch Throw Mama from the Train for a good laugh.
If you haven't seen it, you can find it on Amazon or other places. I will suggest, though, getting the Blu-ray, which I don't know if the DVD versions have it or not. I have the Blu-ray version, and the extras on there really make the movie different.
Some Hitchcock Blu-rays have some really fine extras.
Well, there's a few things that's like the making of, and there's a thing from like M. Night Shyamalan talks about the movie, and then there's a whole thing that's like just old home movies of Hitchcock and his wife and daughter when she was just little. There's a lot of interesting information about the struggles they had to go through to make the movie, or just different things that they did to get certain things to happen, like the nice little shot with the murder and the glasses. There's a lot of things on there that it's like, okay, now I'm kind of looking at the movie in a different light.
Speaking of the shot of the murder and the glasses, now when Bruno strikes at Miriam when she is on the island, it is a strange, almost kabuki-like scene of him strangling her in rather slow motion with the music slowing down. You don't see it just seeing it on screen. They didn't just point a camera at it. No, what you see is his silhouette strangling her silhouette as it's reflected on her glasses, which have fallen on the ground, which
was not fun to film, from what I
was not fun to film. No, it was incredibly technical. They had, and it was incredibly hard on the actress because she had to fall to the ground.
No, she had to float
to the ground.
That was her instructions were float to the ground.
Which I don't even know how you would do that.
Well, from what she said, after 6 or 7 times of trying and falling and hitting the concrete, she found the next time she just floated.
Apparently that does it. That's the magic of it.
And every time it's like, no, float. And they'd do it again. And finally she's like, this hurts.
I think they had to set up like a giant lens.
Yeah, it was like I believe she said it was like a bowl-shaped mirror. With the camera pointing down into the mirror and their reflection. So it was catching their reflection in the mirror.
Which I believe this was the idea that Hitchcock had early on in the pre-production of the film that he was probably telling Raymond Chandler about, that just made Raymond Chandler sick of the whole meeting. Because Raymond Chandler says he just wants to shoot the scene through a Coke bottle or something. And it's like, no, well, Alfred Hitchcock had this amazing plan to reflect the murder on the victim's glasses, and Raymond Chandler couldn't stomach the even hearing about it.
Well, Hitchcock was notorious for not actually liking to make films. He would make his films with his storyboards and put everything out that way. And then when it came time to make the movie, he would say, "I've already made it." So when it came time to actually film it, it was like, I've already seen this in my head. I need it this way. So he was so exacting that it came across with a lot of the actors like, he's a pain in the ass.
This is what I put on the storyboard. This is what you have to do. Such and such. One thing I think has to be mentioned about this movie, though, is that Robert Walker just steals this picture completely. From what I know about Hitchcock, there were characters in his movies he cared about and characters he didn't care about, and the characters he cared about most tended to be the antagonists of bad guys. When Hitchcock was filming Psycho, he didn't care about any of the stuff going on, like to catch Anthony Perkins. He just wanted to get back to shooting Norman. And I think it might not be a stretch to assume that Alfred Hitchcock probably had the same energy and focus on Bruno as the more interesting character in this film.
He was a very interesting character, and the fact that he was played by somebody who was known for playing the nice guy.
Mm-hmm. Now, Walker was Hitchcock's first and only choice to play Bruno, actually. So apparently Hitchcock saw something in Walker that he just spoke to him and said, this is my man to play the bad guy.
Well, there's a story that the actor that played Guy,
Farley Granger,
that he tells that Hitchcock invited him to his house. So he goes there and Hitchcock tells him the story. And he was like, that's great, but who's going to be Bruno? And just immediately he threw the name out there and he's like, wow, interesting.
Oh, speaking of the Blu-ray, you have to tell me, does the Blu-ray have film historian commentaries?
Yes. Well, I don't know if there's commentary, like a commentary track. I didn't pay attention to that. But there is a kind of documentary-ish thing that is one of the extras on there that does have a lot of film historians in there talking about the movie.
That's
so it's better than nothing. I also just got the cheap Blu-ray, and I know there are better sets that have more.
Is it in the Criterion collection?
Mine, or is the movie itself? Mine, I don't believe is.
It wasn't a Criterion Blu-ray then. No, I don't know if it is in the Criterion collection or not. It could be. I can imagine like the Criterion collection would love to have a lot of Alfred Hitchcock movies in the collection. If anyone out there who's not familiar with the Criterion collection, by the way, it is like the premier art house physical media label. Even though they also put out like
crap.
They also put out popular movies. Like,
there is some right crap in there.
I like to believe that if it hadn't been the Criterion collection, some movies would have been lost to critical memory.
There's been a few that they've managed to save.
Buy Criterion movies, people. In fact, buy physical media, because you know what's going to happen someday? Someday everything's going to be on the cloud, and then it will just get censored. And not censored by crusaders, but censored by, if I can paraphrase Joe Bob Briggs, censored by bureaucrats who just say this movie's troublesome.
What happens when the Wi-Fi goes out?
What happens when the Wi-Fi goes out, exactly. But anyway, back to Strangers. Now, we were talking about Robert Walker being cast as Bruno. One of the things that you'll notice as you watch the film Strangers on a Train, or maybe you won't notice. Now, Hitchcock and Walker worked together to come up with a performance and make Bruno come off as a very specific type of person. And that is to say, make Bruno as gay as they could without the censor shooting down the movie. It wasn't obvious. It's not blatant. Bruno doesn't talk like Paul Lynde or bat his eyelashes or any cliched such thing. What he does is modulate his speech with a kind of high society accent and speak with grand flourishes of both eyes and hands, often smiling cattily. He puts a tiny swish on his words, just a little here and there, a lilt to his speech that might not have read as outright gay way out in the sticks, but would definitely make an impression.
There's a little swish in his step, too, if you've really watched his body language. He does seem to, if you watch like the men in the movie, Guy being an athlete, the way he moves, he flows through the scene. The other men tend to lumber through the scenes. Bruno floats through the scenes.
Bruno lives in his own little world.
Hence the blowing up the White House.
Exactly. While Guy sits in his chair on the train, Bruno lays on his cabin's couch like it was a divan. With Guy, he seems to be sizing it up for the most part, though throughout their scenes together in the opening of the film, not so much learning things about him, possibly confirming things he already knew. He knew Guy was a tennis pro. Well, not a pro. He was an amateur tennis player, but either way.
Famous either way.
He knew Guy was attached to a senator's daughter and seeking divorce from a possibly philandering wife. To get into the little homoerotic subtext going on here, to a young, gay, rich man of Arlington nobility, certain facts about Guy's life from the gossip pages would lead to questions about the tennis player's sexuality. Was his marriage to Miriam one of love or convenience to get to the circuit? Was Miriam a philanderer, or was Guy unattracted to women and couldn't satisfy her? Was his relationship with the senator's daughter perhaps another marriage of convenience, a society marriage in which no love was required? Such things couldn't be asked outright, but they could be hinted at. Bruno shows a keen interest in Guy throughout the film that seems to border on obsessive, and one has to wonder if, were it a more open world, if Bruno wouldn't have just asked the Guy out on a date rather than try to trap him in a double murder scheme.
He seems like the Fatal Attraction type.
He does. Bruno comes off like a complete maniac, really.
Luckily, Guy didn't have any bunnies.
As Grimweed has mentioned, he wanted to blow up the White House as part of his plan. He talks about driving 100 miles an hour with a blindfold on. He says he's going to be the first man to land on the moon.
Yeah, at one point in the movie, he says I believe it's when they're in the train talking to begin with. He says he thinks you should do everything at least once. Which includes murder, apparently.
Includes murder. There's a great scene in the movie where Bruno comes to Senator Morton's party and casually moves among the high society guests. I can imagine audiences in the 50s freaking out as they watch this, because Bruno has been portrayed as really just utterly remorseless, and Hitchcock really turns the screws up on this bit. At one point, it seems very like Bruno is about to strangle someone else at the party until he passes out from the raw stress of it. I could be wrong, but I have to imagine Walker's Bruno came off to the audience in the 50s what Heath Ledger's Joker came off to modern audiences.
There is a scene, it's actually before this party, and, well, actually it's right after the murder, when there is the blind man trying to cross the road, and Bruno just casually walks up to him and helps him across the street like it's nothing. Yeah. And it's one of those times when, okay, this guy just strangled this woman with his bare hands and just casually walks away.
With a smile on his face.
And it's one of those where the first time I watched it, it's like, okay, is he doing that? Where it's like he doesn't care because it's a blind man and the blind man's not going to be able to identify him? Or is he just not necessarily the bad guy that you think? He still has some kind of a good side. And that does come up a few times in this movie, where there is a little bit of what is the real story. And that whole passing out that you mentioned is kind of one of those times when Hitchcock decided, okay, he's going to pass out because this strangling episode was like he just was in a trance. And it took him over and passed out. So, yeah, I couldn't help myself. There was something wrong.
Do you think it was possibly traumatic for Bruno to relive the strangling? Like perhaps he actually had a bit of PTSD of some kind from trying to strangle someone again? And
okay, so we should say that there is a little bit more to this scene. Mm-hmm. There is another person that Bruno happens to be looking right at while this happens,
Babs,
who also has glasses on and does bear a slight resemblance to the woman he murdered.
Miriam.
And he's looking at her brings back those memories, and it's like he's looking at her and he's seeing the reflection of the lighter in the glasses as he saw it that night. And it's showing you that he's flashing back, and this flashback, like you said, the trauma of that.
Possibly.
Yeah. Well, there was the other instance where he had fixated on her at the club, which we didn't talk about, but that scene's really, he meets and pretends to be somebody he's not.
I think he goes about saying he's a friend of Guy, doesn't he? And I know he definitely introduces himself to friends of the senators, who are the aforementioned Madame and Monsieur Darville, who he met at the tennis club while Guy was playing tennis. But as far as the scene at the party where he strangles someone, he's having this discussion with these two women about what would be the perfect murder. And he is trying to make a case that strangulation is the perfect way to kill somebody. I believe at the party, when Bruno is doing his strangle show and traumatizes Babs, and then he passes out and is escorted out of the party when he wakes up, I believe Anne Morton, the leading lady, played by Iris Roman, she puts the pieces together with Guy shortly after having seen Bruno strangle someone.
Okay, let's go back to that for a minute. So they meet at the club.
The tennis club, yes.
And she sees his tie clip, which we were shown the tie clip very specifically on the train, and he explained he's got to wear it because his mom gave it to him.
Right.
So she sees the tie clip, and she recognizes it because the scene before when they were walking through
around Jefferson Monument or something.
Yeah. Her and Guy are walking. Bruno shows up and calls to Guy. Guy turns around, walks over to him. She turns and from a distance can see that tie clip. But yeah, so she sees the tie clip and then sees it again
at the tennis club. And I think Guy, when Bruno accosted them the first time at the monument or wherever, Guy
says he had never met him before.
Never met him before. It was just some fan or something like that. He says, he's just trying to keep Anne out of the trap he's in. He doesn't want anybody to know about the murder and what he knows about it.
Well, and you really can't blame him, because when she did finally confront him and say, did he do it? Her reaction was, how did you get him to do it?
Oh, yeah.
And he did say, well, because I didn't go to the cops or anything, because they would say the same thing that you just did. And this is a woman that they're talking about marriage, and she goes right to, how did you get him to do it?
So she kind of assumed Guy was in on the plan. When Guy was not, everybody. Let's just be clear. Well, was Guy in on the plan?
He
Bruno
definitely would be the only person to really benefit.
Well, Guy was the guy. Bruno mentions the crisscross plan to Guy in the train, and Guy just says, "Yeah, Bruno, that's great." And he leaves his lighter in the cabin with Bruno. Should he have been a little more cautious? Well, one, he probably shouldn't have left his lighter, but he clearly wasn't giving much of a care at the time.
Early on, in the conversation, the lighter is brought up, and throughout the whole scene on the train,
The lighter is right there in the
Bruno is playing with the lighter. Bruno has the lighter in his possession pretty much the entire time. So something like that where, yeah, you give him the lighter and spend that much time talking to somebody and eating a meal and everything. Okay, now it's time to leave because I'm at my stop. I could see how the lighter would be left behind.
And I don't think, oh yes, come to think of it, when Bruno mentioned the crisscross plot, Guy was still gunning for the divorce. So
Yes.
Guy was just getting off the train to get to Metcalf, his hometown, which Bruno did not like. It was like, oh, Metcalf? Why would anyone go to Metcalf? So after he gets off the train, Guy goes to meet Miriam, his wife, and talk about the divorce that they both need. And she flat out says she's not divorcing him because she's quite happy in the situation as being the wife of a tennis star.
Yeah, and she's also pregnant with somebody else's child.
She is.
And pretty much just flat out says, I'll just tell him it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
And it was her idea for the divorce to begin with.
So Hitchcock really brings a lot of plot elements to play to really put Guy in a rough spot. Of course, he has Miriam, who he would like the divorce from, but she is not cooperative. And then he has Bruno, who kills Miriam, and he's out of the frying pan into the fire as such. Guy couldn't have known about Bruno's wanting to kill Miriam or anything. Couldn't have taken it seriously because when he was getting off the train and absentmindedly left his lighter with Bruno, he was still quite hopeful for the actual divorce to go through and for Miriam to be reasonable. So, Guy was not in on the crisscross plan.
No.
But everything Bruno said in the opening scene on the train was amusing to Guy. But as far as Bruno, like, I made this comparison between Heath Ledger's Joker because I just think that the audience would have been fascinated with what's this guy going to do next. Oh my gosh, he's strangling an older lady at the party. Oh my gosh, he's passing out now. And I could see how Hitchcock would probably enjoy having the scenes where it just shows Bruno walking around in his bathrobe because you're just getting more Bruno. And Hitchcock liked the darker characters. You know, he liked Norman Bates a lot more than any of the other characters in Psycho. He would have liked Bruno a lot more in Strangers on a Train. The point of the fact is Bruno was sort of the star of the picture, and Farley Granger and the other actors kind of just had to all pick up the pieces as to what they could do performance-wise. And sadly, I believe as Grimweed mentioned earlier, Robert Walker died shortly after filming due to a reaction he had to an experimental drug that was meant to cure his alcoholism. I believe that's what happened to him.
He was pretty much a stumbling drunk from the description I've been able to find. But yeah, he was pretty drunk and he wasn't feeling too well. Apparently he continued to drink and he suffered from depression.
Why would alcohol and depression go to him?
I think is what it was. That he was given a depressant. That's what it was. He was given a depressant. And this was before they knew you don't give somebody that's dead drunk a depressant. And that was what killed him.
So it compounded with the alcohol and...
yeah.
I gotcha. Well, Farley Granger went on to record as being heartbroken by Walker's death and said it was far too soon for a very talented actor. And that's another sad comparison between Walker and Heath Ledger's Joker. Neither of them got to reap the rewards of their amazing performances as villains due to a pharmaceutically induced early demise. But we'll always have Bruno.
We'll always have the Joker.
Well, indeed. Also, when Hitchcock was casting the movie, he wanted a blonde star that he could put on a poster and sell as a classic female lead. The fact that Hitchcock preferred blondes is a basic truism in film. Whoever his female lead was, he liked them blonde, and he liked them dead on screen in some cases. Ruth Roman was not a blonde. Therefore, Hitchcock made her life hell during shooting. And one can only imagine what kind of hell Ruth Roman had to go through with the Hitchcock outright telling her flat out many times during shooting that you weren't my first choice for this role. You weren't even my second choice. So
she did great, and she looked amazing in those dresses.
She looked like a princess.
Disney would have been proud.
Yes. I believe I found a quote from Farley Granger talking about Alfred Hitchcock, and he said that Alfred Hitchcock always needed someone to torture on the film set, and Ruth Roman was it in that movie. So we can only look back and say, like, we can watch the movie and enjoy it for what it is, and we can admire Ruth Roman's performance, but let's compare and contrast the characters of Babs and Anne. Now, Babs is a vivacious young woman who is the senator's daughter, younger daughter.
Played by Hitchcock's daughter.
Played by Hitchcock's daughter, Patricia, who also was in Psycho. Now, Babs gets to, when Guy comes into their lounge, Babs gets to make these wild statements about how, well, the police will be after you, Guy. We know that for a fact. She gets to intellectually jump one step ahead of everybody in the room and show off how smart she is from reading murder mysteries and all these other things. She
basically is like what murder mystery podcast listeners are now.
Exactly. And she just comes off as a very sweet character and a very likable character. Whereas Anne isn't so much. Anne comes off as fairly distant and fairly grave, you could say. You have two female characters, really, Babs and Anne. And Babs is this, again, like I said, vivacious, forward, and astounding young woman who giggles, who's happy, who wears her glasses proudly, and comes off as this charming young woman. And whereas Anne is more reserved, statuesque senator's daughter. And later in the film, Anne actually goes to Bruno's mother and tries to enlist her aid against her son. Bruno's mother is very doting, oblivious. Well, am I remembering it wrong?
Oh no, she is very wow. I mean, that's all I can say. She is very wow.
Yes,
oblivious is not even enough.
No, it isn't. I struggled with the term actually there. Oblivious doesn't even cover it. Her son is a complete psychopath, and
we find out about the plan to blow up the White House from her when she jokingly says to Bruno something to the effect of, "I hope you've given up on your plan to blow up the White House."
Oh, mother, where would the president live? Or something like that.
And then they just casually laugh it off.
They were moneyed aristocrats who were able to make jokes about things that one shouldn't joke about, really. When she says, "Oh, Bruno, was your plan to blow up the White House?" You get the sense that, oh, for her, it's just a silly game that her son played. Oh, Bruno says the most wild things. We as the audience watch this and we realize, no, Bruno probably actually had a plan to blow up the White House.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
And by the way, we're being flagged by the NSA right now because we're talking about blowing up a White House.
Multiple times, yeah.
Multiple
I was
times.
just thinking, we have said that way too many times. So
hello, NSA, and
we don't plan on blowing up the White House, and we don't
do
advocate for it. We want people in the White House to be safe, and we want the house itself to remain standing. Do not blow it up.
Do not, no.
Don't be a Bruno.
Anyway, I just wonder if maybe all of Anne's best parts and best lines got given to Babs, because Babs gets to run off and distract policemen for Guy to get away towards the end. Babs gets to say all these wild and accurate things about Guy's possible guilt.
How old was she supposed to be in this movie?
I got the feeling that she was probably
I was thinking like she was kind of like a teenage sister.
Or something, yes.
Which,
like 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, and if you look at
like a debutante.
Yeah, well, if you look at that, so you have the older, more refined, more mature, that over the years and being a senator's daughter and everything, she's been more straight-laced and everything. And then you have the teen, high-energy, kind of rebellious nature, when you don't really have a lot of girls in that time, especially in the movies, openly discussing being locked in a freezer with dismembered body parts.
Was that part something you said in the movie?
Yes, that was actually at the tennis club. She is talking about one of the cops and says something about he was locked in this, I think it was a freezer. He was locked in there with a leg for hours. And that's why later on, there's that scene when when Guy is talking to this cop and they're talking about having a sleeping bag and staying warm and everything. And he says that he's her new favorite charity. So she's going to make sure he stays warm because of the whole being stuck in a freezer with a dismembered leg.
It doesn't stop her from deceiving him utterly to let Guy get away.
No, but I think that the kind of bubbly teenage spirit for that character, it made it to where the whole distraction thing, it kind of all worked. And the relationship that she had with that cop, kind of like the flirty teenager that's going after the older man, because she also, remember, did look at Bruno to begin with.
Do you think she was attracted to Bruno to some extent?
Or when she first saw him, I don't remember the words she used, but it was like, yeah, who's tall, dark, and handsome over there?
Ah.
And then
good luck with that.
Yeah, then she was kind of like, yeah, he's creeping me out. Mm-hmm. And then the whole strangulation at the party.
But perhaps Babs could inject some lightness and comic relief into the film.
She did.
She did a great deal.
Yeah.
And Patricia Hitchcock did a fine job portraying this young woman who came off as this feisty Washington debutante. Honestly, having seen this movie 3 or 4 times and not remembering it as well as you, thank you. Well done, Mr. Grimley.
Well, so I will admit, going from watching the movie to the extras, just in that, I watched the movie, it's like, okay. And then watched the extras, like, oh, okay.
Those sound like good extras because the best featurettes and little extras on Blu-rays and DVDs are the ones that teach you about the movie and expand your understanding of the film. And otherwise, they're just,
filler.
Filler, yes. One of the things that struck me about the film was Hitchcock's use of time, the intercuts that he had towards the end when Guy is at the tennis match and Bruno is on his way to the island. Guy has figured out that Bruno will only move at night, and that if they can get there before sunset, then he can catch Bruno in the act. So Guy is racing to the amusement park to intercept Bruno, and
let's step back here.
What did we do?
So we have a tennis match where Guy decides, well, if I can just finish this right away, just do the 3 sets and be done, and I can sneak out of here and get away from these cops that are following me so I can get to this island before Bruno. This tennis match, it is Hitchcock, which is really the only reason why I think you could get away with it, because the way he builds the tension, it is a long scene of tennis.
It is indeed. But the tennis is metaphorical of him struggling valiantly now rather than passively.
Which is kind of against his nature.
Yes. And there is even while he's playing the tennis match, it even cuts to one of the announcers who's following the tennis match who says, Guy Haynes is playing like he's never played before today. We are seeing a completely more aggressive Guy Haynes, or something like that.
Yeah, which is why I brought up against his nature, because if you look at how he's acted throughout the rest of the movie, it was more reactionary rather than proactive. It was, okay, exactly. Well, this happened. How do I react to it? And just kind of go with the flow type thing. Whereas in his tennis match, they said he normally is just kind of a go with the flow and play it slow between points. And then it's playing, and all of a sudden it's super aggressive, taking risks. And that's what he's going out there to do, is be aggressive and take a risk trying to stop Bruno.
Mm-hmm. So it's symbolic of Guy's evolution as a character. And perhaps what we see in turn with Bruno is that while Bruno is a hedonist and debauched psychopath, he is also at the mercy of his own whims, and he is also at the mercy of his own
ego.
He could have planted the evidence earlier and just gotten away, but Guy was right about him that he would only do so at night under the cover of dark. So there is a scene where Guy is racing on a train to get to Metcalf, and it'll cut to Guy on the train, it'll cut to Guy at the station, it'll cut to Guy, and you just see Bruno sitting on a picnic table with the sun getting closer to the horizon. Every time it returns to Bruno, you see the sun getting a little closer, and you know that Guy's time is running out, but you know that Bruno was sitting there doing nothing. And then Bruno was, I think I remember when Bruno dropped the lighter down the grate, he immediately runs for help to enlist the aid of various passerby. saying, I need someone to jimmy up this grate, or something like that. And it's like, who do we get to get this thing out? Who do we get to get this thing open? And all these people are just like, you dropped your lighter, pal. What's the problem?
Yeah, and suddenly it's a cigarette case.
It's a cigarette. Oh, he said he dropped his cigarette case instead of the lighter. Yeah.
But, Bruno's not a small guy.
He's not.
And he's got to put his arm kind of deep in that hole to reach that lighter.
He does indeed. I'm surprised it didn't mess up his suit a lot more than it did.
I'm surprised he didn't get stuck.
He very well could have.
And watching that scene, that's where my mind is going. Is that he is making a pretty big scene trying to get a lighter where if he would have just left that, he couldn't have planted it. But you know what? Now he's got no evidence tying him to it either. He could have just walked away.
He could have.
But instead, he is so set on getting Guy framed because Guy double-crossed him and didn't go and kill Bruno's dad. The whole time, his plan was, you go kill him, I go kill her. Nobody knows because we have no connection. Oh, by the way, now let me introduce myself to all of your friends and family. Which actually, I think at the party, he's introduced as friends of somebody else's.
Monsieur and Madame Martaville.
But still, you're showing up a lot of places.
Yeah.
And they know he's not necessarily a friend, but he is an acquaintance of Guy's.
And one thing I think we have to mention is the merry-go-round scene.
That old man.
It is pretty wild.
Okay, first of all, that cop
who shot into the
is responsible for everything. That amusement park could sue that police officer for damages to the merry-go-round, for who knows what, just because their reputation is shot now because of that accident.
No pun intended.
Yeah, sorry, no pun intended on that one.
No,
but that cop is responsible for, almost responsible for the death of a child who, I love that kid, by the way.
What happens in the film, everyone listening? Guy makes it to the amusement park and stops Bruno from getting on a boat to go to the sex island. And
it wasn't so much he stopped him from getting on the boat. There were no boats.
Oh, yes, there were no boats. And Bruno tries to make his escape on a merry-go-round in a way, and Guy follows him onto the merry-go-round, and the police are there, and they are chasing Guy Haynes at that point because they think they have all the proof they need that he is the murderer of his wife, Miriam, at this point because he's returned to the scene of the crime.
Yes, and they see Guy running away and decide, let's just shoot him.
And they miss because he's on a merry-go-round and a moving target, and this person probably wasn't that good of a shot. But they did shoot the operator who was standing at the middle of the merry-go-round, who proceeds to die and fall on the controls.
Shot him in the head.
Shot him in the head. He falls on the controls, and the merry-go-round speeds up maniacally. It just goes faster and faster and faster.
Everybody except for one small boy is on there screaming and panicking. The boy's mother is out there screaming about her son, and the kid is laughing and having a blast and ends up getting in the middle of the fight.
The merry-go-round is going so fast that at one point Guy is holding on to one of the brass poles on the edge of the merry-go-round, and he is flying through the air, holding on for dear life with his legs completely horizontal. It is cartoonishly fast. It is dangerously and ridiculously fast. And
that part of it was filmed on a set or on a stage. They had the screen behind them, so all the scenery is just whipping by, and they had fans. So it looked, for all intents and purposes, as if this merry-go-round is spinning fast. However, not that entire scene was filmed on a set.
There was the stuntman who had to go under the merry-go-round to shut it off, and they had to get a shot of the stuntman moving under the merry-go-round.
Which is one of the few scenes that Hitchcock actually has said that he stressed out, worried about, and at many points thought it was a mistake to do because of how dangerous it was to have this man actually crawl under a merry-go-round whipping around at that speed.
The guy basically had to crawl on the ground flat like a worm, and if he had raised his head at all into the spinning bottom of the merry-go-round, he would have possibly been decapitated, or at least
think every movie you've ever seen with a military boot camp and they have to crawl through the mud under razor wire. That's what this guy was doing under a merry-go-round. And, okay, that merry-go-round is going fast. When you hit the brakes on something going that fast, you do it gradual. No, he slams them brakes on. He stops it.
At which point the merry-go-round completely loses control on the axis it is attached to and throws everybody helter-skelter all over the amusement park.
And in the process, falling to pieces and crushing Bruno.
Which is what we all wanted. Because now, guys, at the end of the movie, Bruno is being removed from they pull some wreckage off of Bruno, and Bruno holds on with his last breath, still trying to frame Guy. With his last breath, he says, "I tried, Guy. I tried to get your lighter off of the island for you."
Guy asks him about the lighter, says, "Just tell him the truth." And he says, "No, your lighter is still on the island where you left it."
Yeah.
And then dies.
He dies, his hand opens, and there's the lighter. The cops know he was lying. The boat operator is able to identify Bruno as the guy who came off the boat that night when the girl was killed, and Guy is cleared. And it's a happy ending, and the monster is dead. Now the horrible boogeyman has been banished to the darkness from whence it came.
But that's not the end of the movie.
The end of the movie is, there's two endings of the movie, but...
okay. I was wondering if you were going to say that. I'm assuming you're talking about the English version?
And the American version.
Yeah. So that's not actually a thing.
It's not.
No. What happened was when you make a movie and you go to show it to the studio or whoever and say, okay, this is what we got, you don't necessarily show them the exact thing. The so-called English version, what that one was, is the movie itself for that ended when Guy makes a phone call to the senator's house to let everybody there know he's okay, he'll be home tomorrow, and asks for some clothes because he basically is still nasty, sweaty, stinky, and wearing clothes that he threw on in a cab right after this tennis match. So at this point, the two sisters give each other a hug. It fades to black. That is the so-called English version. That is actually the previewer that was shown to the studio or whoever. It was shown to them without that final scene on the train.
So they just hadn't tacked on that final scene.
And the whole English version thing was actually because the canister that the film was in was mislabeled as English version.
Ah, and so the legend was born.
Yes.
And the prophecy fulfilled.
And this is, of course, just according to the stuff that the guys that
Blu-ray
made the film were saying on the Blu-ray.
And that's the kind of things you can learn from physical media, everybody. So stop streaming everything and buy some physical media for crying out loud. It's good for the economy. It's good for you. It's good for the world. And
I will do my best to try and remember to put in the description for this a link so you can go and get this exact copy so you can watch these
amazing
great bonus features that I'm talking about. And they really did. For me, it changed the movie.
I'm glad.
Because this has been a process. We watched this movie a while ago and life happened. So in that time, I forgot the entire movie.
You did. It's awful.
Which for me is very unusual. I don't generally forget things like that. I'm usually, you see it once, you remember it, you don't have to worry about seeing it again because you already saw it. But sitting to watch this, there was so many things. It's like, I don't even remember any of this. The few things that I did remember were things that I had seen on YouTube already, or things that I remembered it because it was something that had been parodied in something else.
Like Throw 'Em Out from the Train.
Yes. Which
is another great movie. Another great movie everybody should watch. Billy Crystal, Dan DeVito, and Ramsey.
Last night I sat and watched this again, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's a good movie. And it's good that I'll have a fresh memory of it. And then I decided, let me check out all these special features and see what else there is. And the movie was suddenly a whole different movie. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people now will miss out on. There is actually a YouTube channel. I can't remember her name, but I'll put her name in the description. But she is a millennial that watches movies. And it's all these movies that you think she should have seen by now, but hasn't.
Poor girl.
I think her name is Ashleigh Burton. But anyway, so she watches these movies, and it's like a reaction channel, but she gives her take on them. And she watched Psycho.
Really?
And you never have it. You never really have any of the kills. The kills themselves are kind of bleh. There's a lot of different things about it, and just the camera angles and things like that. And it wasn't until after she watched it and gave her opinion of it, and her commenters said, well, that movie, when it was made, you couldn't show murders. You couldn't show those things on screen. So that movie itself,
show blood on the knife.
It pushed the boundaries. And it's like the murders were all implied. There was no blood. It was chocolate syrup. And there was no this. There was no that. Everything about the movie and how it was done was explained more to her. And all of a sudden, she has a newfound respect for it. And I think that's where a lot of, especially Hitchcock, because he had a way of building things up that I don't think translate well now, unless you're somebody that really likes to just sit and get deep into something.
I love special features. I love audio commentaries. I buy them just for those. I will buy a Blu-ray just for, oh, this has an audio commentary by the director. Oh, this has behind the scenes.
There are some movies that if they have that, great. Any Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell movie.
Oh, great cut, yeah.
Which I say any Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell movie. Even any movie Sam Raimi does, Bruce Campbell's around somewhere. But any movie where Bruce Campbell is the starring role rather than just someone that pops up.
The Evil Dead movies, basically.
Well, yeah.
All right.
For the most part. But even looking at just, okay, I say Sam Raimi. Forget Sam, because even Ted. Like Man with a Screaming Brain with Bruce and Ted. Anything like that. The commentaries are so much more fun.
They are.
But then commentaries on something like The Godfather, which could be very informative, but wow. I'd rather just watch the movie than to listen to someone talk while I'm watching the movie.
Oh, audio commentaries they can be hit or miss. Some of my favorite ones are done by film historians about such and such movie from the 30s or 40s. But Sam Raimi does great commentary, like you said, especially Sam and Bruce when they're together in a commentary booth. It's hilarious. I think Guillermo del Toro does amazing commentaries as well.
There's
Rob Zombie does a good one. I can't find
it. That I know it exists because I remember specifically watching it and listening to it and being amazed with how they set it up. But for Serenity,
okay,
there's a commentary on River's fight scene with the Reavers,
where Joss Whedon says, "My career is all about superhero women destroying monsters," or something like that.
No, actually, in this, they're talking about just that scene itself. They just break that scene down and how they did the lighting for it.
Oh.
And normally it's like, okay, yeah, the technical stuff, yeah, it's cool, whatever. The detail they went into on it about where to set lights and how to set the lights and everything else, it was like, okay, I would never have even thought about that watching that scene. And if you sit and watch it, knowing the struggle they went through to get it lit just right and how they had to shoot it, it makes the scene feel different, which is kind of, I guess, the same thing what I've been saying about the extras on this. It just makes you look at it differently.
And that's what physical media can do. Or just, I guess it's just expanding your knowledge.
This episode sponsored by Physical Media.
Physical Media, which we love.
Let's actually just talk about the movie.
The movie.
Not talk about the details, talk about who was in it, talk about the movie. When you sat down to watch it to begin with, what were you expecting?
I was expecting the movie. I had seen it before when I was 8 years old, and I didn't have many clear memories of it, but I remember liking it when I was 8 years old. I just remember falling into it when I was a kid and thinking this is one of the most suspenseful and thrilling movies I've ever seen. Because I remember watching it when I was a young child with my parents in the living room on TV, and I just remember being completely engrossed. And I remember adoring the characters, or I remember adoring or being terrified by Bruno, even though as years went by I forgot the character's name. So the movie was for me when I sat down with it, it was a refresher course on this film that really sort of opened my eyes to what thrillers can be like years and years ago.
I hadn't seen it until we sat and watched it. Yet I felt like I knew it because I had seen Throw Mama from the Train.
Well, yeah.
So I kind of already knew one's gonna do, the other's gonna say no. And there's been so many references and parodies and things over the years that I kind of felt like I knew really what was going on already and knew where the movie was going to go. So it took me out of it, which is, I think, why I just didn't remember so much, because everything had already known. I think sitting last night with the more limber mind kind of helped put all the preconceived notions and push out the whole Danny DeVito, Billy Crystal combo versus the guy in Bruno. It's a different world. You can't put Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal together and compare that to this. So if you have seen Throw Mama from the Train, yes, it is the same story, but it is not the same story.
No, it's not. Throw Mama from the Train is much more comedy. The movie, like I said, Strangers on a Train, for me, the first watch was a rewatch, and it just couldn't live up to the wonder that I saw it with the first time I saw it as a child.
You're going to make this movie today. What do you change, if anything?
What would I change today? What would I change? What would I... all right, this is a challenge. You're putting me on a horrible suicide quest right now. What would I change about a Hitchcock film?
I'm not asking about like who would you cast. I'm saying, okay, we got the same cast unless there's somebody from that era that you could say she should have been in this role or he should have been in that role. But just say same cast, just the movie itself. Is there anything you would change?
I would just up the the homoerotic thing between Guy and Bruno, and make that a little more explicit, perhaps. That I would have Bruno maybe offer Guy a way out, but it would involve running off with them or something. I don't know. Let's see. I would probably combine the characters of Anne and Babs, so that there's. But then it wouldn't pass the Bechdel test at all, because we wouldn't have two female characters unless you. Yeah, we would.
Well, at the same time, you then would not have anyone to go and distract the cop.
Anne goes to distract the cop. She does it fine. Or have the bumbling old senator go and distract the cop.
He wasn't even there.
I know. Well, see, there you go. But I bet he could probably distract the cop perfectly well, because, what are they going to do? They're going to throw the senator in jail for distracting a cop? I doubt it. This is the 50s. Also, I would set it in the 50s. You know what? That's another thing I would do. If I were remaking the film, I would set it in the 50s. It would be first shot of the film. It would say 1951, Metcalf, New York, or something.
So you would specify date and location.
Yeah. It would be a period flick. And then I would stop myself from trying to remake a Hitchcock movie like Gus Van Sant and the horrible mistake that the Psycho remake was.
I think I would shorten the tennis match.
Shortening. Okay, well, see, look, here I go on this rant about combining characters and all this stuff, and you're just saying, just shorten the tennis match. It's fine.
See, I think having that difference in the sisters, and like we said before, the more straight, mature, juxtaposed with the just kind of a wildness, which wasn't even really wild. It was just like exuberant.
Feisty.
Yeah. And that let them have like, okay, here is the one that you can use to have go and distract or go and do this, because that's that personality, while you can also have the more straight go and talk to the mom, or use as this is the one that you want on your arm when you go to try and get elected.
All good points.
So this is the first movie, so it's not like we can compare it to others that we've watched so far. Where does this fall on your Hitchcock scale?
It's up there as far as how it stands in Hitchcock's canon or oeuvre. I suppose I don't think I pronounced it right. Is it oeuvre or oeuvre?
And Hitchcock's filmography.
That'll work too. Yeah.
I stick with the simple to pronounce words.
Good work.
And even then, I screw a lot of them up.
Thank you, Grim Wade. It's a great Hitchcock movie from the era it was made, but it's not the golden age of Hitchcock. It's not the great thrillers that he was going to start making a few years later.
Psycho, for me, is one of my favorite Hitchcock movies, even though once you've seen it, you know. But it's one of those where you've seen it, but it's still fun to watch.
Don't tell anyone ever about Psycho. Do yourself a favor and them a favor, people out there listening in the movie train. Don't tell people about Psycho in the shower scene. Just let them find out on their own.
Yeah. I watch a lot of YouTube reaction videos. Mm-hmm. And I always like watching Psycho and the first Friday the 13th. Because even though so much is out there and so much has been said, and both of those movies have been referenced in so many things, it always still comes off as a surprise, and it amazes me. Mm. But for me, Psycho, just because it's one of those movies that it can be a scary movie, but it's not really a horror movie.
No.
It's more it's a psychological thriller.
There are horrifying aspects to it.
It's a suspenseful psychological thriller. That's the way I see it.
Yes.
And yet you can watch it with somebody and they'll get freaked out. You can watch it with somebody and they'll just have that white knuckle suspense where they're just on the edge of their seat, can't wait for the next thing. And then after it's done, it's like, whoa. This one, you sit and you watch that, and there is that suspense, and he builds it up. And then when it's done, it's like, okay, let me sit and unpack that for a minute. But then you're done.
Yeah, once you've digested the film, there's pretty much nothing else.
Yeah, and that is coming from someone that knows nothing about movies. Watch the movie and decide for yourself. But I will say to anybody, yes, watch it. It is a good movie. It deserves to be watched. So why don't you let them know some of the movies that they can expect coming up?
Oh, we've got a few movies coming up. We're going to try to get into The Fifth Element, Bubba Hotep, and we've got something special lined up for May season. But we have to keep some things under our hat.
I'd say expect a lot of horror.
Expect a lot of horror.
Expect a lot of obscurity.
Some obscurity is good. I think we've decided on The Day the Earth Stood Still is another classic that we'll be tackling.
But don't be surprised if we pull out things like Toxic Avenger or
Cannibal Holocaust,
random trauma movies, or just things that should never have been made.
But I think we're about to wrap up. I'd like to thank Grimweed for joining me on the movie car, and I'd like to thank our mutual friend for introducing us. Join us next time when we discuss another film. And stay safe out there, everybody, and do not hurt one another. Do not tear families apart, and try to love the world we live in. Don't blow up the White House. Exactly. And thank you, Grimweed, and I think that will do it, and we are off.
See you next time.
See you next time, everyone.
Bye. Attention passengers. We hope you liked the show, or at least thought, hey, these guys have some potential. Please help us out with some stars, thumbs up, likes, subscribes, or whatever rating system is used by whatever app you're listening to us with. Oh, and hey, let us know. What was your favorite scene of the movie?